was amazing to me, that how much more alike we are than different when you do gather in community and create safe space to have these conversations. We are all so much more willing to have them than you would imagine, but we just need the place to do it.
Well, and suffering is not bias in who is affected. It
Mhm.
happens to us all. And there are some people who like to ignore that and think that they will never be touched by like the loss of a child in my case, or their parents eventually will pass. We like to hope that they all have long lives and it's this very natural thing. And I think that's the only type of death that's really accepted, I think, is someone's really old and then it's like, oh yeah, well, they were old. And just moving past that, but it's still a loss. And regardless of the age of someone's mom or dad, they were a mom or dad
Mhm.
or grandparents or great grandparents or whatever, and a special human. And being able to speak about those losses, and others have experienced some really traumatic losses. And I think that there's a whole spectrum of loss. And then as you went through these certifications and as you were sharing and listening, which is probably the best thing I think that people can experience, as a good listener and a friend or professional who they are turning to for help, and that sense of community. And what were some of the tools or things that you suggested, or some nice takeaways? And also with that, when is it appropriate for someone to join a grief circle?
Mm. Good questions. One of the most interesting things as a writer that I had not explored in my own personal journey was writing to my mother. And I read Claire Bidwell Smith's book about, she names the final stage of grief being anxiety. And one of the, and I read it as a tool. It was many, I'm 30 years with the loss of my mother in my rearview mirror, as I say, while it still affects me daily. And I remember her in so many beautiful ways, um, I keep up with resources, and one of those was Claire's book, and she gives a lot of examples of how people came to her practice, what they were experiencing, and what she recommended. And so I loved leaning into this chapter where someone shows up and has this very contentious relationship with their father who's passed, and has this unfinished business that he's experiencing anxiety because he feels like he cannot resolve this issue that he had with his father. She talks about this delicious science around making this connection cellularly when we write by hand and to the person, where you can really craft resolve by writing to them. And I thought, ooh, I've written about my mom, but I've never written to her. And it was this beautiful invitation to use writing in a way that I hadn't before, not just as a tool for others, but as a tool for me. And I think it seemed so unnatural, even though it's such a natural, I've been a paid writer most of my life, and it seemed like such a natural thing that I would lean into, but I never really did. So I did the exercise. It felt completely and totally different than anything I had done before in my own healing. And I started to use that in a lot of my circles. And so writing and a lot of writing prompts became a tool that I would use for others. And for many, that's not a muscle that they've ever used before, or they would say, well, I'm not a writer. And I always say, if you are writing, you are a writer.
Yeah.
So this might not be, anything generative. This does not necessarily have to be, the next great memoir. This is for you. This is for you, and for healing, and for forging a connection, a continued connection to the people that we've lost and loved, or perhaps that we need to make some kind of peace with. resolve some issue. And so writing is so huge on so many levels to me, with clients. I love when I'm in a big group and I give a prompt and you see all the heads immediately go down. So for all the people that say, not me, I'm not a writer, I have to, say, okay, 1 minute left, 30 seconds left, because they're all so deeply engrossed um, in the prompt, and always say, oh, I really didn't want to do that, but boy, that felt so good.